and welcome to this weekly tip. My name is Joseph Toppy. I am the finance coach with Thrive. And this weekly tip, I'm going to talk about the numbers a company must know when it comes to estimating. So knowing your numbers when it comes to estimating. The first thing I want to start off with is talking about the purpose versus the outcome of estimating. So when we look at what estimating is, many think that the purpose of estimating is to get a job or not get a job, right? I'm going to do an estimate so that I can get a job. Well, that is actually more the outcome of why we do an estimate. So the outcome is getting a job or not getting a job, but the purpose of estimating is to recover your costs, recover your expenses, and get paid or make a profit to do so. When we look at estimating, it is actually a game of recovery. So every project, every job has a set of costs associated with it. So these are the labor, the material, the equipment, some different job costs such as dump fees, vehicles, hauling, other items like that. And then every company has a set of expenses, of overhead. And these need to be recovered somehow, and it's done through estimating. And then every company wants to make a profit, needs to make a profit. Because as we've seen throughout time and throughout especially the last few years, even according to a release that was done by the U.S. Department of Commerce, 96% of construction and contracting-based companies fail before they hit 10 years. And the main reason is lack of profitability. So now when we look at what are the numbers that one must really take in consideration when they're estimating, I have a handful of them here for you. The first one is employee cost. So making sure that you know or a company knows how much an employee is costing them is crucial. And not how much you're paying or the company is paying the employee, but all of the other costs associated. So these costs are generally broken into three categories. The first one is the payroll liability or payroll contributions. So these are the extra contributions that a employer must pay for having an employee. So their contributions to certain things like unemployment or their retirement, 401k, things of that nature. The other thing that would fall into that would be workers' comp. A couple other ones are, the second category is employee liabilities. So certain liabilities that you have to pay for an employee. And then the third is employee benefits. So ensuring that the company knows all of the costs associated with an employee. Because if you don't know how much an employee costs, how do you know what you're charging is enough? The second is crew costs. So crew cost is more than just the sum of the employees on there. In a crew, there are other costs that are associated with that crew. One is project manager. So when we look at a crew, generally they'll have a project manager, someone that is kind of overseeing that, working to line up the job so that crew can come. How does that project manager's cost the salary, what they're costing the company? How is that being recovered? The best way to do that is through a proportionate amount in a crew cost. The second area that is also recovered through crew is downtime. Every crew has downtime. This is time where a company is paying the crew, but they're not necessarily working. It's not directly billed to the customer. Whether it's drive time, whether they're waiting for a piece of equipment or the job came to a halt for some reason and they're still on site. the company can't bill these directly to the customer, but they're paying the employee to be there. So working out a crew cost is an easy way to make sure that downtime and project management is being recovered. The third is equipment cost. So when a company is in business and they have as little as one piece of equipment, then that business is actually running two businesses. You have the operating business, the business that's doing the work, and you have a rental business. And what I mean by that is if a company does not have a piece of equipment that they need to do a job, they would generally go and rent that piece of equipment, do the job, and then they bill the customer directly for that piece of equipment. Many companies, however, when they own a piece of equipment, they fail to charge that equipment, much like you would a rental, to the customer. So if the customer is not paying for the equipment, who is? Many times it's the business that's paying for the equipment. Therefore, the business is reducing their profitability because they're not recovering those costs. So knowing how much a piece of equipment is costing per hour or per day allows the company to start charging the client to recover those costs. Job costs. So when we look at a job, there's other costs on top of a job: porta potties, dumpsters, dump fees, licensing, permits, other fees like that. So typically a lot of businesses will look at material, they'll look at labor, they'll overlook some job costs. So it's very important when doing an estimate to take in consideration everything that is involved. If there is travel, if there is special permits that need to be applied for or purchased, if there's dump fees that come, like hauling, if there's just different costs associated like that. So very important to do the due diligence in estimating and ensure that all of those costs are accounted for. And then markup. So a couple things that I want to point out with markup right off the bat. One, markup and margin are not the same. So don't be confused, or they're not interchangeable. They're not the same thing. The second is markup is not just a random number that you pull out of the air, you mark everything up on. Markup is not for oopses, I-Os, contingencies, what ifs, anything like that. Unfortunately, that becomes almost lazy estimating, using markup to essentially cover the things that the business owner doesn't want to spend the time to figure out. So with a markup, the third thing is, markup is not the same for every company. There's not an industry standard. There's not a universal markup. Markup is as unique as a fingerprint for each and every company, because markup is essentially what is applied to the costs of the job in order to recover the company's overhead and the profit. So every company, their overhead is different, their profit goals are different. Thus, markup is, again, unique for every company. So when we're looking at estimating, we're looking at running a business. One of the biggest things is knowledge is power. Knowledge is key. Knowing these numbers to get started will ensure that your estimating will be profitable as long as you're recovering your costs, recovering your expenses, and getting paid or making the profit to do it all.